You took your first breath sometime in the 1650s on a Caribbean island beside a poor family. So there's not much to say about your infancy. Your family was too poor to feed you properly. That is why, as soon as you were weaned, you started working. So do not imagine saving money and dreaming of a vacation in the Caribbean or anything like that. Until the age of 5, your life passed by carrying water to the fields, chopping wood, and gathering fruit. In other words, you had a nightmare of a life. One day, you dreamed of becoming a pirate, sailing into the open seas, finding treasure, becoming rich, and jumping from one adventure to another. That is why, even though your family got angry, you would sometimes go down to the harbor and apply for work on the pirate ships that docked at the pier. There were 3 ways to become a pirate. Some pirates attacked islands or ships and forced the people they captured to become part of their crew. This was usually done to children and men. I will not even talk about what happened to women, but it was as bad as you can imagine. New people were also recruited from ports to replace crew members lost in battle or to disease, and some very rich people could have their own ships built and become pirates with paid crews. So, considering that the place where you lived was often visited by pirates, the chance of being raided was not very likely. You also had absolutely nothing to do with wealth, so you had only one chance to become a pirate, and that was to be accepted onto a ship as a crew member. Until the age of 10, you could not find a captain willing to take you in. When you turned 10, because of all the heavy work you had done in the fields, you already had muscles despite still being a child. You went down to the harbor again and tried your luck. This time, a captain accepted you. You immediately jumped aboard the ship and began your pirate career. Your first day as a pirate was spent learning the pirate code. Yes, pirates actually had rules. The captain was chosen by the crew and could be removed by the crew in the same way. This created a kind of democracy. The loot was divided before it was even found. It was shared equally among the crew. The captain usually received 2 or 3 times the normal share. If one of the crew members lost a limb while on duty, the share he received from the treasure increased depending on the limb he had lost. If we consider the compensation paid for losing a limb as insurance, then you basically had a job with food, lodging, and insurance. Well, congratulations! Pirate ships usually had between 30 and 150 men. Because you were a child, you were given duties such as lookout, cleaner, and gunner's assistant. You were responsible for the cannons and gunpowder. Of course, you also had side duties. You worked non-stop every day to keep the ship in good condition, cleaning the deck, loading the cannons, organizing food and water supplies, and so on. After all of this, even though you felt like a truck had run over you, you still could not rest much. There was no private room or soft bed for you. You slept shoulder to shoulder with the other pirates on hard wooden floors. And unfortunately, none of them smelled nice. Your ship was constantly rocking. This made sleeping even harder. As if all this was not enough, you slept knowing that you could die at any moment. Because pirate ships were often caught off guard by naval ships or by other pirate ships that had run out of supplies. So you could not really get proper sleep. Between cleaning the ship and checking for damage, 5 years passed. When you turned 15, your rank had risen to navigator. You were responsible for planning the ship's route. You were smart, talented, and agile. Among the crew, you shone like a star. Although in the past 5 years, half of the crew had died. Yes, there were no doctors on ships. There were only a few men with a little medical knowledge. They tried to treat simple gunshot wounds or minor bone fractures. But because the ship environment was far from sterile and medical supplies were very limited, even simple wounds often ended in death or the loss of a limb. In fact, this is one of the reasons pirates are remembered with wooden legs and hook hands, because amputations were often the only solution, and there was plenty of wood and metal hooks on the ship. A wooden leg made walking easier, while a hook helped with gripping ropes and holding onto the ship. The biggest problem, however, was scurvy. It was caused by a lack of vitamin C. Because you sailed for months without seeing land, you could not eat fresh fruit or vegetables. You usually survived on stale biscuits, salted meat, and sometimes dried legumes. So getting vitamin C was almost impossible. Scurvy first began with tiredness and weakness. Then came bleeding gums and falling teeth. After that, purple spots appeared on the skin, followed by rashes, extreme exhaustion, and finally death. In fact, when it was discovered through trial and error that people who ate fruit did not get sick, the British Navy began storing lemon juice on its ships for this reason. So even a simple infection, a small cut, or a weakening disease could mean death. Piracy no longer seemed very attractive. You started to long for your old straw-filled bed and even the water you used to carry to the fields. But there was no turning back anymore, because once you had stepped into a pirate career, this was not the kind of job you could simply resign from. If you enjoyed the video, you can support me by liking and subscribing. Researching and editing these kinds of videos takes me days, so it would be a huge motivator for me. Thanks in advance. The moment you left the job and set foot on land, if it was discovered that you were a pirate, the only solution was your execution. So the risk of death on the ship was far lower than the risk on land. To replace your dead crew members and your depleted supplies, you planned to raid a village. You attacked the village. Complete chaos ruled everywhere. After doing several cruel things in the village, you took the children and sailed back toward the open sea. This was your first raid. You had fully faced the true face of pirates. But it was too late for everything. Anyway, days followed days, and eventually you reached the age of 20. During this time, the number of children you had kidnapped from villages had exceeded the number of actual crew members on the ship. This made rebellion inevitable, and before long, a mutiny broke out on the ship. Most of the crew was killed. The kidnapped children temporarily took control of the ship. As punishment, they left the captain alone on a deserted island with only some water, gunpowder, and a pistol. Yes, this was a classic pirate punishment. The mutinous crew considered how merciful you had been toward them, how you had stayed behind during raids instead of killing people, and how strong, knowledgeable, and intelligent you were as a sailor. So they declared you captain. Congratulations on your eye patch and your large hat. The eye patch was not because you were blind. It was used to keep one of your eyes adjusted to the dark. The large hat, on the other hand, showed your rank. The captain always wore the biggest hat on the ship. If you are thinking of getting a parrot, that was not actually very common among pirates. Yes, some pirates took exotic parrots from the islands they visited and sold them in cities so they would not return empty-handed. Most likely, ordinary people who saw pirates with parrots assumed that pirates specifically kept parrots as pets. You had finally reached the rank you had dreamed of since childhood. Your first act was to go to a port and give both yourself and your crew an entertaining day, because being constantly out on the open seas made marriage and love lives nearly impossible. If you were lucky, there might be small affairs in the ports you visited, but a happy married pirate life on a ship was impossible. Of course, from time to time, you would also encounter female pirates. Yes, female pirates existed. Since it was generally believed that having women on a ship brought bad luck, women often boarded ships disguised as men. Over time, they could earn the loyalty of the crew, reveal their identity, and even rise to captaincy. To keep your crew satisfied, you occasionally chased treasure legends and raided other pirate ships with great pleasure. After all, you were the kind of captain who did not enjoy the slaughter of innocent people. Removing a few raiders from the sea made both you and your forcibly recruited crew happy. During raids, you used pistols, cannons, swords, machetes, and hooks. When ships got close to each other, you fought face to face on the deck. Over time, you even began to become legendary. When you turned 25, your ship was known by most pirates, and those who saw you changed their course. During another raid, you encountered someone who had once served under a female pirate captain. During interrogation, he told you that his former captain had fallen in love with one of her crew members and become pregnant. She secretly gave birth on an island, erased her name from piracy, and tried to build a new life. Yes, something like this was possible. If former pirates were not very well known and could hide their identities well enough, they could start a new life from scratch. It was unlikely, but not impossible. Of course, when the island he mentioned turned out to be the same island where you were born, you immediately understood the truth. You quickly changed course toward the place where you were born. When you returned to the island years later, you learned that while searching for you, your mother and father had been forced to reveal that they had once been pirates. Because of this, they were captured by the Navy and executed. You faced the painful truth and your past. Then you returned to your loyal crew, your new family. From the island where you had taken your first breath, you sailed back toward the place where you truly belonged, the open seas. You were never seen again, but your legend spread from mouth to mouth.